There is a kind of collapse more painful than the fall of a building. It's the moment you realize that the architect you trusted with your life, the one who laid every brick of love and hope alongside you, wasn't building a home. They were quietly digging the foundation for your tomb. They smile at you each morning, but in their eyes, they're measuring the dimensions of an invisible casket. They hold your hand, not for warmth, but to check your pulse, waiting to see when your heart will finally give out from exhaustion. My name is Kaelen, and this is the story of how I found the light after being buried under 10 years of a lie. The smell of motor oil, hot metal, and faint rubber. To me, that was the scent of honesty. In the vast and complicated world out there, my auto repair shop was a sanctuary of clarity. Everything here followed the laws of cause and effect. An engine making a strange ticking sound was a sign of a worn piston. A car pulling to one side pointed to an alignment problem. There was no deceit, no complex subtext, just problems and solutions. My hands, though perpetually stained with grease, were the tools I used to build a clean, straightforward life. I had spent my youth learning to listen to the language of machines, to understand their honest complaints. I was proud of that. Every car that rolled out of my shop wasn't just a successful transaction. It was a promise kept, a piece of trust fortified. This garage, with its old brick walls and oil-stained concrete floor, was my American dream, built with sweat, patience, and integrity. And at the heart of that dream, I had once placed Serafina. My wife, Serafina, despised that scent. She never said so directly, because Serafina was a master of subtlety. Instead, she spoke through small actions. When I came home, she would stand at the threshold, as beautiful as a painting, and her smile would only truly reach her eyes after I had walked straight to the bathroom and scrubbed away what she called the smell of manual labor. For years, I thought it was about cleanliness, that she wanted me to be comfortable after a long day. It took me 10 years to realize it wasn't concern. It was perfectly disguised contempt. She had entered my life like a strange, beautiful wind, carrying a grace and elegance that I, a rough-around-the-edges mechanic, never dared to dream of. She told me she loved my authenticity, the way I was passionate about my work. But what she truly loved was the potential she saw in me, an engine of income that needed her steering. She craved a different life, one measured by designer labels, cocktail parties at the country club, and nods of approval from people she considered high caliber. And my calloused hands, the very hands that paid for the silk dress she wore, were the things that embarrassed her most in those circles. Our daughter, Elara, was the purest light in my world. 8 years old, with her mother's large, captivating eyes, but with a genuine warmth all her own. Elara didn't care about the smell of grease. She only cared about her father's arms. Every afternoon, the moment the sound of my pickup truck turned into the driveway, she would dart out the door like a little arrow, her hair flying in the wind, and launch herself at me. She would take a deep breath and giggle. "Daddy, smell! The car smell!" In those moments, I felt like the richest man on earth. Her joy was an unquantifiable asset, the purest fuel for my soul. Serafina would watch from a distance, smiling. It was a smile I would later recognize as that of a scientist observing her experiment. I was too caught up in providing, a trap that snares so many men. I worked 12-hour days, often through the weekends, all driven by the thought that a bigger house, a fancier vacation, a better school for Elara would be the ultimate proof of my love. I entrusted all our family finances, and even a portion of the business accounts, to Serafina. She was smart, quick-witted, and she understood the world of numbers and polished words better than I did. I thought we were a team, a perfect division of labor. I was the engine, she was the driver. I just didn't realize that the driver was steering our entire family straight off a cliff, with a parachute prepared only for herself. A breakdown never starts with an explosion. It begins with silent fractures, so small you convince yourself they're just tricks of the light. With Alara, the first fracture was a hesitation. It was a sweltering Tuesday afternoon. I came home later than usual, my body aching after wrestling with the transmission of a classic car. As always, I was anticipating Alara's hug. But that day, when I opened the door, she was standing in the middle of the living room. She saw me, and instead of running, she froze. It was just for a moment, the blink of an eye. But for a father, that moment lasts an eternity. She looked at me, then glanced quickly at her mother, who was sitting on the sofa. Serafina gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. Only then did Alara walk over, wrap her arms around my waist in a half-hearted gesture, and quickly step back. "Hey, sweetie," I said, trying to hide my disappointment. "How was school?" "It was okay," she mumbled, her eyes fixed on the floor. "Ilara's a little tired today," Serafina's voice chimed in, sweet as honey. "One of the boys in her class was being loud, and she has a bit of a headache. I think she just needs some quiet time." "Oh," was all I could say. I blamed myself. I shouldn't have expected so much. I should have been more observant. I went to the bathroom, and looking in the mirror, I saw a tired man with grease smudges on his face. Maybe I do look scary, I told myself. In the days that followed, the fractures grew wider. Ilara started avoiding one-on-one conversations with me. When I asked about her homework, she'd give short answers and then run to find her mother. When I offered to read her a bedtime story, a ritual we'd had for years, she would say, "Can Mommy read to me tonight?" Serafina, in her role as the devoted mother, always had the perfect explanation. "She's growing up, honey. She's starting to want her own space." Or, "She's been more sensitive to loud noises lately. You know, your work can be a bit intense." She would say these things with a sympathetic smile, placing her hand on mine, and once again, I would believe I was overreacting. Serafina's manipulation was a masterpiece of cruelty. It wasn't about screaming or accusations. It was about whispers, small suggestions dripped into the impressionable mind of a child. She would wait until I wasn't there, and I can only imagine what she said. Perhaps, "Daddy loves you, but sometimes he can't control his temper." Or, "If Daddy ever raises his voice, it's not your fault, sweetie." She was turning me into a potential threat, a dormant volcano that could erupt at any moment. She didn't have to tell outright lies. She just had to twist the truth, casting a fog of fear over my image. One Friday evening, I brought home a model race car set Alara had been wanting for weeks. I walked into the living room, excited as a kid myself. "Ilara, look what Daddy has for you!" She was sitting on the floor, drawing. At the sound of my voice, she flinched so hard that her crayon dropped to the floor with a clatter. She looked up, and for a second, I saw pure terror in her eyes. She scrambled backward, pressing herself into the corner of the wall, her hands flying up to cover her head. It's okay. I didn't do anything wrong," she stammered, her voice trembling. My heart felt like it was being crushed in a vice. I stood frozen, the toy box in my hands suddenly feeling impossibly heavy. What had I done? Had I ever raised my voice at her? I searched my memory, desperate to find some transgression that would explain this fear. But I couldn't. Just then, Serafina swept in like a savior. She rushed over and scooped Alara into her arms. "Oh, my sweet baby," she cooed, shooting me a look filled with reproach. "Kaelen, I told you not to burst into the room like that. You scared her." I just wanted to give her a present," I said, my voice failing me. "Later," she said, her tone cold. "Right now, she needs to calm down." She carried Alara out of the room, leaving me alone with the toy box. and an inexplicable sense of guilt. That night, I sat in my garage until the early hours. The familiar scent of motor oil offered no comfort. I looked at my own hands, wondering if they were truly the tools of a monster. Serafina wasn't just stealing my daughter. She was stealing my very identity, replacing it with a distorted image that even I was beginning to believe was real. While my home was being eroded from within by poisonous whispers, my financial foundation was being shaken by a ghost. A ghost named Julian. The first time I heard the name was over dinner. Serafina, after complaining that the dishwasher was making too much noise, changed the subject abruptly.
You know, Kaelen, I met the most fascinating man at the club. His name is Julian Vance. He's a wealth manager. Incredibly smart.
I nodded, half listening as I cut my steak. Is that so?
Yes,
she went on, her eyes lighting up in a way I hadn't seen in a long time.
He was talking about the stock market, about hedge funds, things we've never even considered. I think we're letting money die in the shop's business account. Inflation is just eating it away.
Julian said that with our capital, we could double it in a year. I'm a practical man. I believe in what I can touch, what I can fix. The world of stocks and bonds was as foreign to me as another planet. I don't know anything about that stuff, Sarah. My business is simple. Fix cars, get paid. It's safe.
It's because you're too safe that we're stuck in place,
she sighed. A dramatic, theatrical sigh.
Don't you want a better future for Alara? A house with a pool, a trip to Europe? Julian can help us get there. He manages the portfolios for half the members at the club.
Her argument, as always, revolved around Alara. She knew it was my only vulnerability. The thought of being able to give my daughter the world clouded my judgment. I'd worked so hard to build a solid foundation, and maybe it was time to let a professional help it grow. All right, I said after a long pause. If you trust him, let's give it a try. But start small. It was the biggest mistake of my life. Small quickly became larger. Every month, when I reviewed the books, I'd see significant withdrawals with the note JV investment. When I asked, Serafina would show me complex charts and figures she said Julian had sent. The market is doing great, she'd say, her voice buzzing with excitement. We're making a lot of money, honey. I wasn't seeing any of that money. Our lifestyle hadn't changed, except that Serafina was shopping more. Handbags and shoes whose price tags could cover one of my employees' salaries for a month. But I was so tired and stressed from what was happening at home with Alara that I didn't have the energy to argue about finances. I chose to trust her intelligence, to trust her desire to build our future. I didn't realize that the future she was building had no room for me. Julian became a fixture in our conversations. Julian says tech stocks are about to surge. Julian advised we buy more gold. Julian and I had lunch today to discuss the new strategy. The name echoed in my house so often that I felt like he was an invisible member of the family, a smarter, more successful, and apparently more interesting member than me. Once I overheard a snippet of Serafina's phone call. She was in the garden, thinking I was still at the shop. Her voice was giddy and flirtatious, a tone I hadn't heard directed at me for a very long time. No, Julian, he has no idea. All he knows is grease and wrenches. Yes, that's right. I can't wait either. When I stepped outside, she snapped her phone shut. Oh, just a business partner, she said, slightly flustered. Talking shop. That night I lay awake. A cold, unsettling feeling crept into my gut. I was a mechanic. My job was to diagnose problems based on the signs, and all the signs were pointing in one direction. There was a critical leak in the system of my life. A leak named Julian, and it was draining not only my finances, but also the love and trust from my family. but I still wasn't ready to face the truth. Like a car owner who refuses to believe his beloved engine is failing, I kept trying to convince myself it was just a minor issue, something that could be fixed. I didn't know that the engine hadn't just failed. It had already been replaced. There are physical pains you can endure. A deep cut, a searing burn, even a broken bone. But no physical pain can compare to the agony of watching your own daughter recoil in terror when you walk into a room. It's an invisible acid, dissolving your soul from the inside out. The event that pushed me to the edge of despair happened on a Sunday evening. It was supposed to be family day. At least, it used to be. I tried to recreate a happy memory. I suggested we all play a board game, one that Ilara loved. Serafina agreed reluctantly, saying she needed to spend some quality time as a family. We sat around the coffee table. At first, things seemed okay. Ilara even smiled a few times, but I could feel her tension. She kept glancing at her mother, as if seeking permission to be happy. Every time it was my turn to roll the dice, she would tense up slightly. On one of my turns, I landed a major score. On pure instinct, I let out a cheer of excitement. Not a yell, just a happy, "Yes!" as I threw my hands up in the air. Ilara's reaction was instantaneous. She screamed. A blood-curdling, terrified scream. She knocked the entire game board over, sending plastic pieces scattering across the floor. She scrambled backward, pushing herself into the corner of the sofa, wrapping her arms tightly around her head, her body trembling violently. Don't hit me! I'm sorry, she sobbed. My entire world stopped turning. Hit her? Me? I had never, not once, laid a finger on her in anger. I stared at her, my heart shattering into a million pieces. Ilara, sweetie, I was just playing the game, I said, my voice shaking as much as she was. I reached a hand out toward her, wanting only to comfort her, but she screamed even louder. Don't touch me! Get away from me! That's when Serafina made her move. She didn't rush to comfort her daughter. She rushed to solidify her narrative. She threw her arms around Ilara, shielding her from me as if I were a wild animal. Kaelen, what did you do? She roared, the first time I'd seen her display such open anger. I warned you. Your temper was going to hurt her one day. Temper? I just cheered, I protested, feeling completely helpless. Your cheer sounds like thunder to a sensitive child, she retorted, tears welling in her eyes. Look what you've done to our daughter. She lifted Ilara, who was still sobbing hysterically in her mother's arms. We need to get out of here. It's not safe for her anymore. She carried Ilara into the bedroom and slammed the door. I stood there, frozen in the living room, surrounded by the scattered game pieces. They looked like the wreckage of my family. I sank to my knees and picked up a red token. My token. What had I done wrong? Had I really become a monster in my daughter's eyes without even realizing it? Serafina's words cut through my mind. Your temper. Not safe. How long had she been planting those poisonous seeds? What lies had she been watering them with? And why had I been so blind? I couldn't sleep that night. I sat in the darkness of the living room, listening to Ilara's muffled sobs from the bedroom, interspersed with Serafina's soothing whispers. I was certain those whispers were part of the plot too. It's okay, sweetie. Mummy's here. I won't let anyone hurt you. I felt like I was trapped in a nightmare where I was the villain. I began to doubt myself. Maybe I really did have a problem. Maybe the stress of work had made me intimidating. Maybe I hadn't noticed the change in myself. Serafina's manipulation was so successful that it had invaded my own thoughts, making me question my own reality. I felt more alone and lost than ever before. right inside the home I had worked so hard to build. It was the bottom of despair, the place where a man starts to believe his enemy's lies more than the truth of his own heart. When you're lost in a dense forest of lies, sometimes you don't need a detailed map. You just need a harsh wind to blow through, strong enough to shake the leaves and reveal a single, faint ray of truth. For me, that wind was named Brenna. Brenna was my older sister. 5 years my senior, we were complete opposites. Where I was quiet, patient, and inclined to trust people, Brenna was blunt, fiery, and had a bullshit detector that was terrifyingly accurate. She lived in another state, and we didn't see each other often, but our bond was unbreakable. She was the only person on earth who would call me a damn fool to my face, and she was usually right. She called to announce a surprise visit for the weekend. "Got some business nearby. Figured I'd stop in and see how my favorite niece is doing," she said over the phone. A part of me was relieved, but another part was filled with dread. I didn't want her to see the state of my family. I didn't want to explain Alara's fear or the cold tension between Serafina and me. I was ashamed. Serafina, upon hearing the news, feigned absolute delight. "Oh, that's wonderful! I haven't seen Brenna in ages. Let me get the guest room ready." It was a perfect performance. Serafina knew how to handle Brenna. She would use her charm and grace to envelop my sister's prickly exterior, neutralizing any suspicion. Brenna arrived on Friday afternoon. From the moment she stepped into the house, I could feel the atmosphere shift. Her radar was on. She gave me a powerful hug, then held me at arm's length and looked me straight in the eye. "You look like hell, Kaelen. Lost weight and got dark circles under your eyes." When Alara came out, Brenna's face lit up. "Come here to your auntie, you little munchkin." Alara hesitated. She looked at Brenna, then at her mother. Serafina gave an encouraging smile. The little girl walked over and allowed Brenna to hug her, but it was a stiff, joyless embrace. Brenna noticed immediately. Her brow furrowed, but she said nothing. Throughout dinner, Brenna was the only one trying to keep the conversation natural. She asked Alara about school, about her friends. Alara answered in monosyllables, each response short and followed by a glance at her mother. Serafina played the perfect hostess, constantly offering Brenna more food, asking about her job, complimenting her blouse. She was trying to control the narrative, to steer it away from the problems within our four walls. The incident happened when I was pouring water. I accidentally spilled a little on the table, a minor, perfectly normal accident. But Alara flinched violently, her eyes wide with panic. She looked at me, then at the puddle of water on the table, as if it were blood. Brenna saw it all. She put her fork down, and the look she gave Serafina was no longer social. It was as sharp as a knife. Later that night, after Serafina and Alara had gone to bed, Brenna pulled me out onto the back porch. "All right, Kaelen, tell me what the hell is going on in this house." I tried to cover it up. "It's nothing, Bren. Alara's just been a little sensitive lately." "Sensitive?" she scoffed, a humorless laugh. "That's not sensitive. That's terror. The kid is scared to death of you. I saw the way she looked at you, like you're a monster, about to tear her apart. What did you do to her?" "I didn't do anything," I nearly shouted, the injustice of it all boiling over. "I swear!" Brenna stared at me for a long moment, her gaze seeming to pierce right through me. "Okay, I believe you. But if it wasn't you, then who was it? Who is turning you into a monster in her eyes?" She didn't have to say the name. We were both thinking of the same person. "Serafina wouldn't do that," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. "Why would she?" "I don't know why," Brenna said, her voice hard. "But I know something is rotten here.
A child's fear like that doesn't just appear, it's cultivated, and I'm going to find the gardener. She looked at me, her eyes a mixture of anger and sympathy. And you, Kaelen, you need to stop being so damn patient. Your endurance isn't a strength right now, it's complicity. You're letting evil run free and destroy your life and your daughter's. Brenna's words were like a bucket of ice water to the face. For the first time, someone from the outside was looking in and confirming that I wasn't crazy, that what I was feeling was real. The harsh wind had arrived, and though it was chilling, it was also starting to blow away the thick fog of deceit that had enveloped me for so long. That night, for the first time in months, I didn't feel alone.
I felt like I had an ally, and the fight to get my daughter back, to get myself back, was about to begin. "I have an idea," Brenna said the next night, as we sat in her car parked on a quiet street corner a few blocks from my house. Her voice was low and decisive. "It's a little crazy, and possibly illegal, but I don't care." She opened the glove compartment and pulled out a small black object, no bigger than a quarter, a listening device. "I'm going to plant this in the living room," she explained. "We need to hear what she says to Alara when you're not there. We need proof." The thought made me shudder. Secretly recording conversations in my own home. It felt like a final admission that my family had become a war zone, and I was resorting to wartime tactics. "Bren, we can't do that. If she finds out..." "Then what, Kaelen?" She cut me off, turning to face me, her eyes blazing. "She'll be mad. What more are you afraid of? You've already lost your daughter, don't you see? She lives in the same house as you, but her spirit has been kidnapped. What are you waiting for? Until she needs therapy for the trauma her mother is inflicting? Until Serafina successfully convinces a court that you're an unfit father and takes her away for good?" Every word she spoke was a dagger to my hesitation. She was voicing the greatest fears I hadn't dared to confront. I had been so focused on enduring, on hoping things would magically get better, that I'd forgotten that in a war, silence and patience only benefit the enemy. "What do I have to do?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "Tomorrow night," Brenna laid out the plan. "You tell Serafina there's an emergency at the shop. An important client needs an urgent repair. You'll be gone for about 3 hours. I'll stay behind. Say I'll watch Alara. When she's not looking, I'll plant the bug." The plan was simple, but executing it felt like a betrayal of everything I'd ever believed in. But then I thought of Ilara's terrified eyes, and I knew I had no other choice. The next evening, I played my part. I took a fake phone call, my face a mask of stress. "Damn it, another problem," I said to Serafina. "I have to get to the shop. It's going to be a few hours." Serafina was the picture of understanding. "You go, honey. Don't worry. Brenna and I will be here with Alara." There was a glint in her eye I couldn't read. Was it relief? Or something else? I drove away from the house, but not to the shop. I parked at our designated corner, where Brenna had instructed. I killed the engine, sat in the dark, and waited. Those 3 hours felt like 3 centuries. With every passing minute, my imagination conjured worst-case scenarios. What if Serafina found it? What if she didn't say anything incriminating? What if Brenna and I were just being paranoid? The waiting was torture. I felt like one of the old cars in my shop, the engines sputtering, running on the last fumes of hope. I looked at the clock on the dashboard. Time seemed to have stopped. I turned on the radio, then turned it off. The silence was better. At least in the silence, I could hear my own heartbeat. A reminder that I was still alive, still fighting. Finally, my phone buzzed. A text from Brenna. "It's done. Come home." I drove back, my heart pounding against my ribs. When I walked in, Brenna was reading on the sofa, and Serafina was watching TV. Everything looked completely normal. Too normal. "Everything okay, honey?" Serafina asked, her eyes not leaving the screen. "It's fine now," I lied. Brenna looked up at me and gave a slight nod, a secret signal. The bug, our invisible listener, was in place. It was there, hidden behind the sofa, silently gathering the truth in a house built on lies. The next few days were an excruciating test of patience. I had to act as if nothing had changed. I had to continue living in Serafina's play, cast as the weary husband and the intimidating father. Every time Serafina spoke to Alara, I held my breath, wondering if this was the moment she would administer more poison. It felt like walking through a minefield. That tiny recording device became the focal point of all my hopes and fears. It was just a piece of electronics, but to me it was a lifeline, the only tool that could diagnose the sickness that was destroying my family. I could only pray that when we listened to what it had captured, it would give us an answer, no matter how painful that answer might be. Truth, sometimes, doesn't arrive like a ray of light. It arrives like a rusty blade, tearing through everything slowly and painfully. 3 days after Brenna planted the device, she said it was time. "The battery only lasts about 72 hours. We have to get it out." We waited until the next morning, when Serafina took Alara to school and then headed to the country club for her new yoga class. The house was empty and eerily silent. Brenna quickly retrieved the tiny device from behind the sofa. She held it in her palm as if it were a bomb. "We're not listening in here," she said. "Let's go to the car." We sat in Brenna's car, parked at the end of the street, the windows rolled up, creating an insulated bubble against the outside world. She plugged a pair of earbuds into the device, then plugged the other end into a small, portable speaker. "I don't want to listen to this alone," she said. She pressed play. At first, it was just the sounds of the house. The TV, the vacuum cleaner, the rustle of Alara turning pages in a book. My heart hammered in my chest. What if there was nothing? What if I had been wrong to suspect my wife? Then, we heard it. It was from the second day, in the afternoon. I had still been at the shop. The sound of a phone ringing filled the recording. And then Serafina's voice came on. But it wasn't the sweet, controlled voice I was used to. This voice was bright, animated, and filled with a throaty intimacy.
"Hey there, Julian, my love."
The name was a punch to the gut. Brenna glanced at me, her eyes filled with concern. We kept listening. It was a long conversation, and every word was a sledgehammer blow to the foundation of my life. "Is everything still on track, baby?" A man's voice came through, deep and confident. Julian's voice. "Perfectly," Serafina giggled, a flirtatious, throaty laugh I'd never heard before. "He doesn't suspect a thing. Just keeps his head buried in that filthy garage, thinking he's the hero providing for his family." I closed my eyes. My breathing grew heavy. "And what about the finances?" Julian asked. "Don't worry, Julian, my love. The money is safe in our account. Over $150,000. Not bad for the life's work of a greasy mechanic, huh?" Serafina said, her voice dripping with contempt. "Just one more transfer and we'll have enough for the down payment on the lake house." $150,000. That was my savings, my business's safety net, Ilara's future. It was gone, stolen by the very person I had entrusted with everything. But the worst part was yet to come. "The best part is Alara," Serafina went on, her voice filled with smug satisfaction. "She's almost completely convinced that Kaelen is a monster. I just have to create a few minor situations, a loud noise, a stern look, and she just cowers. She plays the part of the scared child perfectly. I've even recorded a few videos. They're incredibly convincing." I felt physically sick. She had weaponized our daughter's pain. "That should be enough for the court," Julian said. "Absolutely," Serafina confirmed. "The court will have no choice but to grant me full custody. They'll think I'm saving her from an abusive father. After that, we can go public.
and his rusty old garage will be paying our child support for years. He'll be paying for our lake house, Julian." The call ended with professions of love and shared laughter. Brenna turned off the recorder. The silence in the car was more deafening than the cruel words we had just heard. She didn't look at me. She just placed her hand on my shoulder. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't punch the dashboard. A terrifyingly cold clarity washed over me. The mechanic in me took over. I no longer saw a broken marriage. I saw a system that had been deliberately sabotaged. The engine had been poisoned. The wiring had been cut. The chassis was corroded. The problem had been diagnosed. "Kaelen?" Brenna said softly, her voice laced with worry. I turned to look at her. For the first time in months, my eyes weren't filled with confusion or self-blame. They were filled with resolve. "Send me that audio file," I said, my voice eerily calm. "And now, we're going to see a lawyer, not for a divorce, to start a war." My world had shattered, but from the rubble, a new man was born. A man no longer blinded by misplaced love. A man who would no longer be patient. A man who was going to fix his own life, not by patching up the cracks, but by dismantling the entire fraudulent machine and rebuilding it from scratch. And this time, he would do it for himself and for his daughter. The period between discovering the truth and the final day of judgment was the most refined form of psychological torture. It demanded a level of self-control I never knew I possessed. I had to go home every night, face Serafina, and act as if nothing had changed. I had to live with the enemy, eat at the same table, sleep under the same roof, all while the voices of her and her lover echoed in my head, planning my destruction. Every one of her actions was now seen through a new lens, a lens of stark reality. Her smile was no longer warmth, it was a mask for contempt. Her words of concern were no longer love, they were calculations. "You look exhausted, honey," she said one evening, her hand resting lightly on my shoulder. "Why don't you let me give you a massage?" Before, I would have felt comforted. Now my skin crawled as if a snake were slithering over it. I knew she didn't care about my exhaustion. She was just checking to see if her prey was tired enough to stop fighting. "No thanks, I'm okay," I said, keeping my voice even. "Just a lot going on at the shop." Dinner became a tense pantomime. I sat there, watching her serve Alara, cooing loving words at her. It took every ounce of my strength not to stand up and flip the table. I had to look at my daughter, the child being psychologically manipulated by her own mother, and say nothing, because the truth would hurt her even more. I could only try to convey my love through small gestures, a nod, a faint smile, hoping that somewhere deep inside, she could still feel its authenticity. The hardest part was continuing to play the role of the volatile father. Serafina continued her charade, creating small situations to reinforce her lie. She would deliberately leave a glass too close to the edge of a table, and when I walked by, and it inevitably fell and shattered, she would gasp. "Kaelen, be careful!" she would exclaim, rushing to scoop up a startled Alara. "See, sweetie, Daddy didn't mean it. He's just a little clumsy." And I had to stand there and take the unjust blame, because any protest would be interpreted as the very temper she had fabricated. I learned that my silence, in this context, wasn't weakness. It was a strategy. I was gathering more evidence of her manipulation right before my own eyes. Meanwhile, during the day, I was working with my lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Ms. Davis, whom Brenna had recommended. After listening to the audiotape, she looked at me with a mixture of sympathy and vicarious fury. "This is one of the most cruel cases of calculated emotional abuse I've ever seen, Mr. Miller," she said. "We're not just filing for custody. We're pursuing criminal charges. Financial fraud, child endangerment, conspiracy to commit perjury.
We are going to leave them with no way out. We worked secretly with financial investigators. They traced the $150,000. It hadn't been invested anywhere. It had been funneled through several shell accounts and finally landed in a joint account under the names Serafina Miller and Julian Vance. They had already used a portion of it as a down payment on a lakeside property, just as they'd said on the tape. Their dream was built with my sweat and tears. Every day in that house was a test. I had to memorize every word, every action. I became an actor, a spy in my own life. I learned to hide my emotions behind a mask of weary indifference. Serafina thought her plan was succeeding brilliantly. She thought I was broken, that I had accepted my fate. She had no idea that beneath that exterior, a fire was smoldering. Not the wildfire of blind rage, but the controlled burn of justice. Brenna called me every day.
Hang in there, little brother. It's almost time. Think of Ilara. Think of the moment you can hug her without her flinching.
Her words were my strength. I clung to them. I clung to the image of a future where my daughter and I could start over. A future free of lies and cruel conspiracies. A week before the court date, Serafina served me with the divorce papers her lawyer had drawn up. In them, she demanded full custody, the house, the business, and a staggering amount of alimony. She sat across from me, her face a perfect mask of feigned sympathy.
"I'm so sorry, Kaelen," she said, her voice catching as if she were about to cry. "But I have to do this for Ilara's safety. I hope one day you'll understand." I looked into her eyes, and for the first time, I didn't look away. I looked straight into the emptiness, the evil hiding behind those beautiful features. I just nodded slowly. "I understand," I said. And it was the truth. I understood more clearly than ever before. She smiled, a victor's smile. She had no idea she had just signed her own conviction. The game was almost over, and I was ready for the checkmate. The courtroom was cold and formal, the air thick with tension. Everything seemed to be a shade of somber brown, from the hard wooden benches to the high, imposing walls. I sat next to my lawyer, Ms. Davis, trying to keep my breathing steady. I was wearing a suit, my only good one, but it felt like a suit of armor. On the other side of the aisle sat Serafina, a masterpiece of sorrow. She wore a modest dress, her makeup applied subtly to highlight eyes that appeared puffy from crying. Julian sat in the front row behind her, arms crossed, his expression one of grave support. They were the perfect pair in their self-authored tragedy. The hearing began. Serafina's lawyer went first. He painted a picture of me as a neglectful husband and a volatile father, a man whose work and stress had turned him into a danger to his own family. He presented his evidence, the videos Serafina had secretly recorded of Ilara cringing when I came near. On screen, I looked exactly as she had described, a clumsy, intimidating giant. Then Serafina took the stand. She began to speak, her voice trembling. She told the court of her constant fear, of the nights she had to hold Ilara while she slept because she was having nightmares about me. Tears began to stream down her face. She didn't sob. She let them fall silently, a performance of restrained agony. "I love my husband," she said, her voice choked with emotion, glancing at me with a look of profound pity. "But I love my daughter more, and I cannot stand by and watch her live in fear every single day. I just want to protect her." The courtroom seemed captivated by her performance. I could feel the gazes of sympathy turning toward her, and the looks of condemnation turning toward me. Julian nodded solemnly, as if validating every one of her lies. The rage inside me was a physical force, but I kept my face a blank mask, just as Ms. Davis had instructed.
Let her bury herself, she had said. Finally, it was our turn. Miss Davis rose, her demeanor calm and collected. "Mrs. Miller," she began, "you've just testified that you are doing all of this for your daughter's safety, correct?" "Yes, that's right," Serafina replied, dabbing the corner of her eye with a tissue. "And you maintain that Ilara's fear is a direct result of your husband's volatile and unpredictable behavior?" "Yes," Serafina said, her voice firmer. "Did you ever, not once, speak ill of Mr. Miller or distort his image in front of your daughter?" Serafina looked offended. "Of course not. I would never do something so cruel." Ms. Davis nodded. "I see." She turned to the judge. "Your Honor, the petitioner would like to present a piece of evidence, an audio recording of a telephone call made 3 weeks ago." I saw Serafina freeze. A flicker of confusion crossed her face, quickly replaced by confidence. She must have thought we had nothing on her. Ms. Davis pressed play on a device. The sound of the conversation between Serafina and Julian filled the silent courtroom. "Hey there, Julian, my love." Serafina's expression began to shift. The confidence vanished, replaced by bewilderment. She shot a look at Julian, who had also sat up straighter, his face tense. As her own voice echoed through the room, mocking me as a greasy mechanic, bragging about the stolen $150,000, the entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath. But the final, damning moment was when she spoke about Ilara. "The best part is Ilara. She's almost completely convinced that Kaelen is a monster. She plays the part of the scared child perfectly. The court will have no choice but to grant me full custody." The tape ended. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. I looked at Serafina. Her beautiful face was now a twisted mask. Her complexion went from rosy to pale to a sickly grey. Her eyes were wide, filled with the naked horror of someone whose soul has been laid bare for the world to see. She looked at me, then at her lawyer, then at the judge, her mouth agape, unable to form words. The judge, an older woman with stern eyes, stared at Serafina with unconcealed disgust. She banged her gavel once, the sound echoing like a gunshot. "This hearing is adjourned," she said, her voice like steel. "Based on the evidence just presented, the court makes an immediate ruling. Temporary full custody of the minor child, Ilara Miller, is granted to her father, Kaelen Miller. A restraining order is hereby issued against Mrs. Serafina Miller." Serafina slumped in her chair, but her nightmare was only beginning. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "this court orders an immediate criminal investigation into Mrs. Serafina Miller and Mr. Julian Vance on charges of financial fraud, conspiracy to commit perjury, and the emotional abuse of a minor." As 2 bailiffs approached Serafina and Julian, I saw the glamorous life she had schemed for turn to ash. She lost her daughter. She lost the money. She was about to lose her freedom. All that was left was public humiliation. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt a profound, overwhelming sense of relief. The machine had been dismantled. The truth was out. Justice, however delayed, had finally spoken. Leaving the courthouse that day, I didn't feel like a victor. I felt like a survivor of a catastrophic wreck. I had salvaged what was most important, but the scars, both seen and unseen, would remain forever. The first thing I did was go to Ilara's school. When she saw me waiting at the gate, she hesitated. The habit of fear was deeply ingrained. But this time, Serafina wasn't there to give a signal, to whisper a cue. There was only me, standing with open arms and what was probably my first genuine smile in months. I knelt down to her level. "Hey, sweetie. From now on, I'll be the one picking you up every day." She looked at me, her big eyes searching mine. Then, a small miracle happened. She walked forward, slowly, and wrapped her arms around my neck. It was still a timid hug, but it was a real one. I breathed in the scent of her hair and felt like I had finally come home from a long, lost journey. Our healing process wasn't easy. For the first few weeks, Elara would still jump at loud noises. She would still ask about her mum. I had to explain things to her as honestly but as gently as I could. I told her that Mummy needed some time to fix her mistakes, that she still loved her, but that Daddy and she were going to have a new life now. My garage became our sanctuary. After school, Elara would come to the shop and sit on an old stool, drawing while I worked. Gradually, she started to get curious about my job. She asked about the wrenches, about how engines worked. The smell of motor oil was no longer scary. It became the smell of safety, the smell of Dad. One afternoon, while I was working on a car, Elara timidly asked, "Daddy, can I help?" I handed her a clean rag. "You can polish this headlight for me." She wiped it carefully, her small face a mask of concentration. When the headlight gleamed, she beamed with pride. "I did it, Daddy!" In that moment, I saw a piece of the light return to her eyes. We weren't just fixing a car. We were fixing our lives, together. We found joy in the small things, cooking dinner together, watching cartoons, taking walks in the park. The house was no longer a stage for fear. It became a home again, filled with laughter instead of poisonous whispers. Serafina and Julian faced the consequences. They were convicted of fraud and ordered to pay back all the money they had stolen, plus damages. Serafina lost her parental rights and received a suspended sentence. The high-class life she had dreamed of became a humiliating nightmare. I never spoke ill of her in front of Elara. I just wanted my daughter to grow up without hate in her heart. As my story comes to a close, many of you might feel a sense of satisfaction at Serafina's downfall, and I understand that. But what I want to share with you today isn't the satisfaction of revenge, but the peace that comes from healing. This story was never just about an affair or financial fraud. Those were just the symptoms of a much deeper disease, a sickness of values. Serafina wasn't evil because she fell in love with another man. She became truly monstrous when she was willing to sacrifice the soul of her own child to achieve a material goal. The greatest cruelty isn't taking someone's money. It's taking their faith in love and planting fear in an innocent child. As for me, I learned a costly lesson. My patience and endurance, qualities I once considered virtues, can sometimes be the very soil where evil is allowed to grow. Love does not mean blindness. Trust does not mean abdicating your right to ask questions. Like a good mechanic, we have to perform regular inspections on our own lives. We have to listen for the strange noises in our relationships, pay attention to the warning lights in our own hearts. Ignoring those signs isn't optimism, it's negligence. My journey with Elara is ongoing. Every day, we tighten another bolt of trust, wipe away another grease stain from the past. True wealth isn't found in lakeside houses or massive bank accounts. It's found in the unafraid smile of a child. It's found in the peace of coming home to a place you know is real. If this story has touched you, if it's made you think about the relationships in your own life, or if you've ever had to fight for your own truth, please leave a comment below. Every story you share is a testament that none of us has to repair our lives alone. Thank you for listening, and please consider supporting the channel so we can continue to share stories that are real and that matter.